Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another video. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who plays Carson Teva in The Mandalorian and most recently in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 5, recently revealed in a podcast the hilarious way that George Lucas reacted when Dave Filoni told him Grogu's name. Now, even though we as the audience had to wait until season 2 to find out about Grogu's backstory, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have known about the child's name ever since they first created him. And that was something that they, along with some of the cast and crew, had to keep a secret for the best part of a year and a half. Now, as is very well documented, George Lucas has visited the set of The Mandalorian many times, not just out of personal interest, but also to advise Dave Filoni on some of the creative decisions. Nothing major, just to get his feedback. As we know, Filoni was the student of George Lucas himself, and understands the intricacies of Star Wars better than anyone else, apart from George Lucas himself, and he no doubt consulted him on many an occasion when it came to decisions on The Mandalorian. And one thing that Filoni spoke to Lucas about was the decision that he and Favreau had come to make the child a member of the Yoda species. So in a recent edition of the podcast Toying Around, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee talks about how George reacted when Dave Filoni came to him with the name of the child. He says that George did not like the name Grogu and actually found it quite silly. So in retaliation, when Filoni asked George what he would name the child, he saw that Dave was wearing one of his wolf jackets and George blurted out the name Axe Woves. Now, as we know, Filoni would go on to use this name as one of the Night Owl Mandalorians that we saw in season 2, alongside Bo-Katan and Koska Reeves. Filoni and Favreau ignored what George Lucas said and went on to call the child Grogu nonetheless. It's quite a funny story and I absolutely love gems like this. Now, as we know, George Lucas had a few rules when it came to Star Wars, and one of them was to never reveal the homeworld or official name of the Yoda species, something which I'm sure Filoni is always going to respect, and I cannot imagine him going against George's wishes. And until Paul Sun-Hyung Lee told this story, I often wondered what George thought of Grogu. We all saw that picture that went viral of George holding the child, but until now we had no info on what his thoughts were. He was always protective of the Yoda species, so the fact that they created a character to be a member of it always fascinated me. Now, we rarely get these kind of stories, which is why I wanted to share it with you guys. George Lucas, for the most part, stays out of the public eye these days, so when we do hear stories of him from others, it's always a treat. And I'm sure Filoni explained to him all of the backstory of Grogu at the time. We got a snippet of it in chapter 13, but there is still so much backstory to Grogu that needs to be explored, and I'm sure we're going to see that in the future. Notably, the mystery of who saved him from Order 66, and also the big question, is he the love child of Yoda and Yaddle? I personally think he is, and at the very least, he knew of Yoda. In The Mandalorian Season 2, when Ahsoka name drops Yoda, Grogu's eyes light up. And I'm sure we're going to get answers in due time. And I also just want to say that while George Lucas has stayed out of the limelight and has denounced the sequel trilogy as, quote, not my stories, I think it's clear from what Paul said, and others on set who've given interviews, that he might take much more of a liking to The Mandalorian. It may not be what he ever envisioned creating, but given that Filoni is part of that team, and Dave has always respected George's wishes first and foremost, the show is in great hands. And the reception from fans speaks for itself for both seasons 1 and 2, and of course chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, which is ironically considered the best episode of the series so far, and it didn't even include Boba himself. So as I say, just a quaint little story, one in which I thought was well worth sharing. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below of George Lucas's reaction to Grogu. And just a little backup question, what do you think of Grogu's name? Would you have named him something different, or has his name grown on you? So share your thoughts in the comments down below. Give this video a big fat thumbs up if you enjoyed it, but otherwise I'll see you in the next one. I'm Star Wars Meg, may the Force be with you always.